Very good morning to you all. I always say good morning, but I noticed Natasha said very good morning. I thought that's a nice way to start it. So, good morning, friends. What do we have here? 60 of us are here already. How's everyone? We had fireworks last night. Just before I went to sleep, there was a little thunderstorm that came in, flashes of lightning and big sounds. And then about 2:30, it started back up again and ended up being my morning alarm clock. So, but we got a good soak this morning. So, a little bit of news while everyone's getting their coffee and tuning in. Got an email this morning from T. Sarna and Ajahn Viradamo again to be giving a Dhamma talk today. So if you want a full Dhamma talk and not just Ajahn Sudanto's coffee time reflection, and you're free at 4 p.m., they have the Zoom information on the T. Sarna mailing list, and I'm sure you could contact the office there if you don't have that. So, and they are publishing those later if you're not free at 4 p.m. So, fresh Dhamma talk there. And I don't think I'm on Ajahn Suchito's list, but I believe he's doing something every week. Maybe some of his fans here in the chat can clarify when his next Dhamma talk is. But as it's Friday, there's Dhamma talks today. And then Baigiri usually has a Saturday Dhamma talk as well. So Dhamma talks tomorrow. Dhamma, Dhamma, Dhamma. So I see a couple questions there, but I had some. Oh, here we go. Carol has shared the answer with us here. Ajahn Suchito, Saturday, 4 p.m. That's good. It doesn't conflict with Ajahn V's talks then. Info is on the Chithurst website. So Ajahn Krunadamo brought up a few volumes of a Ajahn Suchito book that's relatively new. I hadn't seen it before. It's a bit of a compilation of his teachings. Big, thick thing. And I haven't started it yet, but it looks quite interesting. So, and for those in White Salmon, we have a couple copies. And hopefully the Portland Center has some, but that's closed right now. So if people are looking for a copy, you might get the ebook or consider writing a Baigiri, although I don't know where they are with their regular book mailing project. Normally that's run by a few lay volunteers down at a Baigiri. And with the pandemic situation and the adjustments, I'm not sure they're doing that as normal. I see a question from Debbie for Carol there, and maybe Carol can answer that in the chat. I'm not sure if it's the one Carol worked on, but I don't think so. I think this is a more comprehensive book of Ajahn's talks over the years. A compendium of Ajahn Suchito, if you will. So, so this morning in my meditation, I'm musing on a few things, and in particular, one thing that kind of came up in relationship to just thinking about this endeavor of focusing the mind, and in particular, the cultivation of the steady mind, the still mind. How it is that we bring our mind to an object of contemplation or an object of meditation, and then are able to sustain and hold it, as opposed to this more fragmented, disunified, distracted mind. Sometimes I call it the diverse mind. And thinking also about like when the hindrances have been successfully kind of dealt with, overcome, suppressed, are in abeyance. The jhana factors in particular come to maturity, and a very clear sign beyond a successful ability to stay with the object of our contemplation, our meditation, and beyond even the arising of joy and happiness, piti sukha, is this ekagata, or stillness of mind, sometimes called singleness of mind or oneness of mind, a kind of firmness of mind. And one way to sort of think about what's going on there in relationship to some of our normal orientation and obsession and investment in the sense realm is sated with joy and happiness, and entering into the stillness that's born of the mind coming to wholeness and coming to rest. One's constant obsession, thinking, concern, scanning the horizon, and even interest in finding pleasure and fleeing pain has a chance to subside, and the mind moves to a profound state of stillness and firmness. And even though equanimity is said not to become fully mature until the fourth jhana, there's already something of a sign of equanimity, especially in relationship to the sense realm. That quality meditation sort of brings us an experience of that, a profound experience of that. The mind feels very whole, feels very steady, feels very firm. And it is an intrinsically pleasant sensation to be aware of and to experience. And I was thinking in particular, I mentioned the other morning, like just the experience of stillness towards the end of meditation, and like setting this determination to try to carry some of that stillness into the day. And in particular, some of Ajahn Chah's teachings on rising above like and dislike, and how critical they are to us as Dhamma practitioners came up. And so I did a little Googling about this morning, trying to find one of those passages to share with people for your contemplation this morning, and just read that out, and then maybe we can move to taking some questions. I think it's a really wonderful reminder. So let's see if we can go into screen sharing mode here. After you get up from the formal sitting practice and go about your business, walking, riding around in cars, and so on, whether your eyes see a form or your ears hear a sound, maintain awareness. As you experience mind objects which give rise to liking and disliking, try to consistently maintain awareness of the fact that such mental states are impermanent and uncertain. In this way, the mind will remain calm and in a state of normality. As long as the mind is calm, use it to contemplate mind objects. Contemplate the whole of this form, the physical body. You can do this at any time and in any posture, whether doing formal meditation, practice, relaxing at home, out at work, or in whatever situation you find yourself. Keep the meditation and the reflection going at all times. Just going for a walk and seeing dead leaves on the ground under a tree can provide an opportunity to contemplate impermanence. Both we and the leaves are the same. When we get old, we shrivel up and die. Other people are all the same. This is raising the mind to the level of vipassana, contemplating the truth of the way things are the whole time. Whether walking, standing, sitting, or lying down, sati is sustained evenly and consistently. This is practicing meditation correctly. You have to follow the mind closely, checking it at all times. So I've always liked this this innovation of Ajahn Chah and the way he talks about contemplating sort of liking and disliking and watching out for that and checking that. It's a very folksy and I think approachable way to talk about the hindrances. If we look in the suttas, so many times where the hindrances are being referenced, especially in brief, like the Buddha talks about covetousness and grief in regard to the world. And this is what I call our wrong-headed or immature investment in the sense realm, not yet mature in terms of like spiritual maturity or wisdom. We still have some sort of strategy in finding a kind of completeness, a contentment, and a happiness that really can't be found in the realm of birth and death, the realm of sensuality. And we are kind of obsessed about it. I mean, much of our day is thinking, considering, making decisions, and trying to adjust ourselves in the sense realm. And as Ajahn Chah says in another place very strongly, if you haven't risen above liking and disliking, you haven't even begun to practice. And our efforts to bring clarity to the mind very much include this kind of rising above liking and disliking. And there's so many different, I guess, dimensions or ways into it. I mean, we could talk about it as mindfulness, as many do, and just this kind of steady mind that is able to be anchored in the present moment, because liking and disliking sort of are constantly pulling us out of a kind of wholeness of mind, a stillness of mind, a clarity of mind. And literally like pulling us out of ourself. But also it is, that is the experience of the hindrances, is constantly being buffeted by like and dislike, and we have to get kind of over that or beyond that, to get to kind of stillness and clarity of mind that really allows us to access wisdom or see the kind of characteristics. And like in that passage of that reading, Ajahn Chah is kind of pointing to, if we look after the mind and care for the mind, then whatever our posture, and as we move through the day, then one has access to this kind of wise view on the world, recognizing impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and selflessness in the environment and in our interactions with other people in a way that hastens a deepening of wisdom and the overturning of suffering, the alleviation and the overturning of suffering. So I thought I'd just kind of raise that as a framework for one's practice, and again, as a way to kind of tie our formal meditation practice into our daily practice. It's very simple. It's very direct. Like just as a point of mindfulness, to be watchful of this tendency to be pushed and pulled by like and dislike, and instead try to rise above that. Try to keep a certain evenness of mind, steadiness of mind, equanimity, acceptance, that allows us to kind of see clearly and make good choices as we move through our day. So, All right, well, let me see. I saw a question early on from, excuse me, from Adil. Go to that. Ajahn, how to refrain from indulging in idle speech when it usually makes up the dominant part of one's conversation with friends? It's a good question. I mean, in the chat after Anil, when I first saw this, I said the short answer that most people don't want to hear is get better friends. But in truth, even that doesn't fully solve the problem. I don't want to cast any judgments or despair any of my fellow monastics, but it's difficult practicing right speech in a way that is completely purified. So we are kind of social creatures, and obviously some of the way we maintain relationships with people isn't always deep and profound kind of conversation. So, and there's a constant encouragement not to engage in idle speech or even gossip in the monastery. But I remember thinking about times where I lived in monasteries where there was very little talk, and sometimes relationship problems in the community would kind of come up through all kinds of misunderstandings. And some of it is just because a certain level of exchanging information and interrelating through speech was absent, and could kind of breed, some someone misinterprets some action or some look or something that was said in jest. Then they take it off and they stew about it. So anyways, yeah, it is difficult. I mean, the Buddha's encouragement is to be one given to little speech, devoted to solitude, and even like in the midst of conversation, not just trying to steer the conversation and engage in truly useful speech, meaningful speech, but also with an eye of extricating oneself. And this in particular is instructions he's giving to the monks. So, one wants to cultivate something of that sort of attitude towards speech. And beyond that, it really just takes a kind of determination to sort of train oneself. But it's a tall order. It's not an easy thing. And people do adjust, and so if there's certain forms of speech or topics or unskillful ways of speaking, and you yourself are quite kind of diligent and committed kind of not to go there or something, people do adjust, sometimes even in very unconscious ways. But also sometimes they'll respond to an encouragement, like, this is not working for me, let's not go there. So it's maybe hard to do that if the speech is just mere idle speech, like, because many people don't recognize that as being harmful at all, and they're very heedless about sharing that kind of informal speech. So that's where kind of just limiting the amount of time one gives oneself to that can be important. So anyways, I hope that helps, Adil. A few thoughts. It's a tall order. It's not easy practice. Let's see, I saw another question down here. A few people have taken to popping in a emoticon red question mark anything to catch my attention is good. Can you say, I'm not sure, I see, Shelley, you have a question here, but I don't understand it. Maybe you can clarify. Can you say ditana like ditu padana? I'm not sure if that's a question directed to me or someone else, but I don't understand it. Let's see. Okay, and on Adil's question again, Dantika. Idle speech can also be just a way to exchange some spirit with your fellow human, and it feels nice. Nothing to say, really. It doesn't seem wrong to me. Well, if that's really what your intention is, then maybe it's not idle speech. It can be easy to create too strict of an idea of what maybe the Buddha means by idle speech. And this is why it's good to have some association with or experience being around very mature kind of practitioners, or having teachers that you have great faith, are quite accomplished in the practice, and just seeing how it is that they relate in the world. And I had that experience. I've had so many experiences of that, sort of living as a monk. Some very formative ones living in Thailand with a couple particular monks. And it's not that they don't engage in friendly conversation and ask about your health. And like even in the suttas, like when someone comes to approach the Buddha, or the Buddha approaches the monks, oftentimes there's this phrase like, after courteous and amiable talk, or some sort of like friendly exchange had been engaged in, then the topic kind of turns to a more serious question. So, there is a place, you walk up to the Buddha and the first thing he hits you with is paticca or some super serious admonishment. And, spending time with various teachers in Thailand, I mean, they're often asking about your health and how are you and how's your mind and how's your practice, and engaging with laity and lay visitors, often asking about their life and their family and their well-being. Sometimes talking about things going on in the community. And I'm sure, the aim there is to maybe put them at ease or to make them comfortable. Sometimes people are very anxious, like when they come to visit the monastery or they come into the presence of a great teacher. And so it always comes back to intention. What's your intention there? I don't get too focused on the specifics of the action all the time. Intention is the prime mover in terms of karma. And there's a way that we can engage in different forms of speech to cheer someone up, to help them feel comfortable, to relieve some anxiety, just exchange information. We're in a relationship. It's necessary to kind of exchange information. Okay. Ajahn, can you discuss the doctrine of anatta versus the concept of self, soul, Atman? What is reborn if no self? Does no self mean no I, me, mine, and not a universal soul or self? Thank you. Well, that's a big topic, Abby. Anatta versus the concept of self, soul, or Atman. Yeah, I don't like this word doctrine. When when thinking about the Buddha's teaching on anatta, because I think the Buddha has got a very practical teaching. He's encouraging a kind of investigation of the experience of self, and in particular wants us to notice how notions of self are things that arise and pass away, and that they're not substantial. And in particular, he wants us to notice the role that selfing kind of plays in the experience of dukkha. It's based on, it's not really knowing that experience of selfing and certain unexamined attachment to notions of self that plays a critical role in the experience of suffering and the creation of dukkha. So, and I don't think the Buddha is merely pointing to that as like a worldview or a philosophy or something. It's an injunction to examine the role of self. And if you look at the Nata Lakkhana Sutta, the discourse on non-self, which is one of the three cardinal suttas, you see he's involved in this dialogue. He's not just merely sort of saying, hey monks, there is no self. You should pick up this belief that there is no self. He leads them through a discursive examination of the characteristic of impermanence, and then an examination of that which is ephemeral and impermanent, or anicca in the Pali language is unsatisfactory, and then ties that to the concept of non-self. And the phrase in particular is that which is impermanent and unsatisfactory, is that worth calling a self? And he also points to the illusion of control. It's like, because we can't control these ephemeral conditions in any way to experience lasting satisfaction in samsara, then he says it's not fit to call some of the traditional ways that we conceive of self, this mind, this body, or some other more grand notion, as self. So, as for other conceptions of self, soul, Atman, etc., it's been a long time since I've given those much attention, and I'd probably just butcher them. And people on the internet would come after me for misrepresenting their philosophies and their religion and their other views. So I'll leave that aside and just kind of focus on my take and understanding of how this kind of teaching of anatta sort of sits within Buddhism in a very kind of practical way. So the Buddha does refute many different notions of self in the teachings. So, and the way it's expressed, in the Pali Canon and in the early Buddhist teachings, I think is so unique. It's been an interesting contemplation over my life, looking at the teachings of various people and how, in some sort of subtle way, they're always smuggling in a sense of self. Because on some level, that is one of our prime strategies to find meaning in the world, and I would say even like satisfaction. If I just knew who I was, the promise is somehow I would know my place in the universe and be complete. But really, what the Buddha is pointing to is that's a misguided notion. You need to kind of understand sort of like what's driving the compulsion to sort of confect these various notions of self, or believe in various notions of self and me and mine, and understand the limitation of those. And through a development of our spiritual path and insight, a deep insight into those things, we're able to sort of relax the compulsion of always having to frame things in terms of self. Good morning, Venerable Dhammadipa. Dear Bhante, Piti Sukha and Abhipomayadayang. What? I don't recognize that Pali word. In the Anapana Sutta and the 16 steps, could you explain a bit from your experience what's the difference? Maybe email me something a little more detailed and concrete, and we can take a look at that another time. So we're coming up on 8:30 now, so I'm going to scan the chat window one more time, and we'll maybe move on. So Charles is asking, is there a particular version of the Dhammapada that I recommend? None of them are pleasing to me. No, that's not true. I mean, there's several that I like. I like for different reasons. My favorite is a little difficult to get a hold of, and it's by Carter and I can't remember the Sri Lankan scholar's name, but it's published by Oxford University Press. And one of the reasons I like it is I find the translations very straightforward, and there also is some commentary that they translated, and many of them don't have commentary. So Oxford University Press, Carter, I want to say Carter and Ross, but that's not right. If you're really interested, I could email you a link for that. So I like K.R. Norman's translations as well, and I also like Ajahn Tinisro's translation. So, and a few years back when I was spending some time studying Pali, part of the book I was working through has you translating verses from the Dhammapada. And at that time, I did a kind of a review of many of the different editions of the Dhammapada. And that's when I kind of settled on those three as kind of my favorites. And sometimes I would look to others for various passages or to get a sense of certain translations. So, but yeah, I don't have one. I mean, Ajahn Tinisro's is free and available as an ebook, so that's an easy one to get a hold of. The Oxford University Press one is a little more difficult because it's been out of print, I think, for quite a while. But I think there are ebook versions of that too. In fact, I think I have one. So, all right. See a bit more conversation about idle talk. Yes, the challenge. So. The fourth precept, most difficult. Well, it seems like people have a hard time keeping the other ones too. But even for those dedicated to practice, we stumble on the fourth precept. So, all right. Well, I'm sure some of you have to get to work, and Zuri, which Pali book where I was working through? I think it's called A New Course in Pali Reading. New Course in Pali Reading. It's a very small book, and there's some, if you look around on the internet, Bhikkhu Bodhi gave a whole course based on this, and so there's recordings where he's giving commentary and going through those teachings, which is really nice. And it's good. It's not like most Pali stuff is oriented towards linguists and scholars. And what's good about that New Course in Pali Reading is it has a practical approach. It's trying to teach you just the basics of Pali by looking at suttas, and many of the suttas in the book are very good and short, and so you're kind of learning Pali so that you can read. And my interest in learning Pali is like for contemplative reasons, so that I can look up a passage that interests me in the English translations, and then look at the Pali and understand enough of the grammar and enough of, say, the Pali roots, so that I can kind of contemplate meaning that you might not be so obvious in the English translation. Here we go. Thank you, Carolyn. The Dhammapada, the sayings of the Buddha, edited and translated by John Ross Carter. That's it, John Ross Carter and Mahinda Palihawadana. I hope I said that right. There's a couple different versions of that too, so you might look carefully online. All right, everyone have a good day, and see you tomorrow, Saturday morning. So be well, friends.